Hello and welcome. My name is Melissa Galasso, and I'm excited to have you here today to talk about the newest SAS, SAS 140. Now, this SAS is part of a much larger suite of SASes that are designed to really change the auditor's report. So starting with SAS 134, we get the new report. 136 creates the employee benefit report. And then we see changes and conforming amendments. So SAS 139 doing the conforming amendments for the 800 series, which is our special purpose frameworks and our summary financial statements. SAS 140 has a very similar goal here, which is conforming amendments to various sections. So a little bit of background on SAS 140. So again, this is amendments to AUC section 725, 730, 735, and 940 to incorporate audit report changes from SAS number 134, which is the new audit report, and SAS 137, which is supplemental information related to an annual report. So this was issued in April of 2020. And really is trying to incorporate and just be conforming amendments, which is what all the standards are about, to take that standardized report and really apply it to other scenarios besides your basic audit opinion. So the first thing that AUC section 725 does in this update is just clarify that supplementary information is not an emphasis of matter paragraph or other matter paragraph. It's actually, in fact, a separate section of the report. And this is consistent with the language that's in SAS 137, but kind of clarifying it. It's the same thing for what we had before with going concern, right? Going concern used to be an emphasis paragraph, and now it is a separate section of the report. So supplementary information is getting a little bit of a more narrow definition, and we're really having sections of the report for given topics. And so that was one of the big changes, very similar to AUC 730 here. RSI is not an emphasis or other matter paragraph. It is a separate section. It also clarifies and adds some language in the report indicating that RSI is the responsibility of management. So that is an additional change that you will see in the report. AUC 930, which is related to reviews of interim financial information. This is also conforming amendments, but there's a couple of things to remember here. We have lots of different types of reviews. We have reviews under the SASes, which relate to interim financial information. We have reviews under the SARs, which are related to reviews of financial statements in order to give a conclusion. And then we have our reviews that are performed under the SASes related to information other than a historical financial statement. So we use this term review pretty frequently. And so what they're clarifying here, these are reviews for interim financial information. And all we're really doing here is conforming to SAS 134. But the big change here is that it does not use the term conclusion, which has been in the extant standard. In addition, it introduces that concept of a basis, because we're going to refer to a basis for results section, similar to the basis for opinion section in SAS 134. So when you're looking at the independent auditor's report, or sorry, I shouldn't say auditor, I shouldn't say review, in the independent auditor's review report, because this is a SAS, so it is an auditor's review, what you're going to notice is that we're going to start the opening section, similar to SAS 134, is the results of the review of interim financial information. So just the way SAS 134 starts with the opinion section, we're going to start with the results of the review of interim financial statement. You'll notice in the opening paragraph, we still have to describe the who, the what, and the when, who's being audited, what periods are being audited, and which financial statements are being audited. So that is going to stay the same here. But you'll notice the addition of the related notes element, where we're focusing on the fact that it's not just the financial statements, but the notes are part of the interim financial information. Then we have our language. Again, this is a review report, so based on our review, we are not aware of any material modifications that should be made to the accompanying interim financial information for it to be in accordance with, and then you would identify the framework, so GAP would be an example there. So very similar to SAS 134, opening paragraph, and then our results, because we are not giving an opinion here, we're just giving the results. Then we have our basis for our review, very similar to SAS 134. We conducted our review in accordance with GAS. I'm so used to saying that. I think that is so funny that it just naturally comes out. But it does say GAS applicable to reviews of interim financial information. And then it indicates what is a review. A review of interim financial information consists principally of applying analytical procedures and making inquiries of persons responsible for that financial and accounting matter. A review is substantially less in scope than an audit conducted in accordance with GAS, the objective which is to express an opinion regarding the financial information as a whole, and accordingly, we do not express such an opinion. We are required to be independent of ABC Company and to meet our other ethical responsibilities in accordance with the relevant ethical requirements relating to our review. So you can kind of see here in the basis, we have our opening sentence, very similar to SAS 134. Then we have our description of what do we do in our review coming from the extant standard. But then we add in, we are required to be independent of, which is the addition from SAS 134. And then we close with, we believe that the results of our review provide a reasonable basis for our conclusion. So I think that's really interesting as we go back and forth through this. We would then have a responsibilities of management section, basically explaining that they're responsible for fair preparation and fair presentation, and also for the design, maintenance, and implementation of internal controls relevant to the preparation of fair presentation. Then you'll notice that we would have to remove the auditor's responsibility section, since we have already really covered a lot of that in the basis section, and then the conclusion has already been moved up to the results paragraph. So we would be wrapped at that point. They do change the report date here, and this is pretty interesting because this dating convention is now more consistent with ARC section 90, which is the review of the financial statements, as opposed to AUC section 700, which is based on that sufficient appropriate evidence. So here the date is no earlier than the date on which they've completed procedures sufficient to obtain a basis for reporting whether the auditor is aware of any material modifications that should be made, and in order for it to be in accordance with the financial reporting framework. All the statements and disclosures have been prepared and management has taken responsibility for that information. So there is different than the extant standard, which is just the data completion of the review procedures. So that's another big area to point out. They also point out here that going concern in this section was updated to be a separate section, not an emphasis paragraph consistent with SAS 134. Another section that got a lot of updates is related to compliance audits, but this one had a couple of things in addition to SAS 134. There were changes in the uniform guidance. There was changes in the 2018 Yellow Book that were incorporated. So you're going to see some updated terminology. We're no longer going to refer to A133, thankfully, in the standard. We're going to recognize the uniform guidance. And then they're also going to use proper references to the ANA guide name. So how do you know this? You can see things from like the 2019 compliance supplement where it says the applicable compliance requirements are those that are subject to audit. That was a major change from just being applicable to being subject to audit. You'll notice the language in the definition of government auditing standards to include the addition of reviews of financial statements, which is from the 2018 Yellow Book. That was a new type of engagement added in that revision. They also have to change that definition of materiality based on SAS 138. So while we are thinking about this, typically we think about materiality in terms of misstatement, but in a compliance audit, it's actually related to material non-compliance. So the updated definition, again, moving away from that could to that would really, and making this updated definition. So what is material non-compliance? In the absence of a definition of material non-compliance in the government requirement, non-compliance with the applicable compliance requirement is considered quantitatively or qualitative material if there is a substantial likelihood that individually or in the aggregate it would influence the judgment made by a reasonable user of the report on compliance about the entity's compliance with the requirements of the government program as a whole. So they're kind of giving the same language that we have in SAS 138, which is for those financial statements. You'll notice the movement away from OMB A133 to referencing Title II Part 200, which is the uniform guidance. So a little bit more clarity there. And then it does clarify that AUC Section 701, which is CAM, and 703, which is related to the employee benefit plans, are not subject to compliance audits. So when we are doing a compliance audit under 935, these are two additional sections we would not apply. They do update the audit report, so this is definitely consistent here. So when you're doing a uniform guidance audit, you'll notice that we still start with the opinion going first here. So we're going to have our opening paragraph, who we audited, what was the subject of that audit, and then we would have in our opinion the entity complied in all material respects with the requirements referred to above that are applicable to, and then you'd give the applicability there for the year, and then you'd provide the date. We then have our basis, talking about we conducted it in accordance with GAS. We would also mention that government auditing standards, and then our responsibilities are further described in the audit responsibility section. So very similar to the basis paragraph in the standard report. It would continue, we are required to be independent and to meet those other ethical responsibilities similar to SAS 134. And then we believe the audit evidence we have obtained is sufficient and appropriate to provide a basis for our opinion. Our audit does not provide a legal determination of the compliance with the compliance requirements referred to above. So we are not lawyers, we are auditors. We then have management's responsibility for compliance. So you'll see the design, implementation, and maintenance of internal controls, very consistent, as well as compliance with the compliance requirements. The auditor's responsibility also beefed up. We'll see that reference to the GAS. We'll talk about the definition of reasonable assurance. We'll talk about the difference between fraud and error. We'll talk about the materiality of noncompliance consistent with that updated definition. We will also refer to the rules related to the governmental audit requirement or government program here from the audit guide, talking about exercising judgment, risk assessment, and then I'll go through and provide the compliance with the compliance requirements, talking about obtaining an understanding of internal controls, and then communication with those charged with governance. So very similar to what we would have. And then we would have a report on internal controls over compliance because that is part of the definition, but you'll notice that management's responsibility has been moved out of this section. And then we'll have that definition of deficiency, of material weakness, and significant deficiency. And then we'll talk a little bit about the purpose of the consideration of internal controls, and then not designed for expressing an opinion, and then the purpose of the report, and then we're going to have that restricted purpose. There are other amendments here to AUC 940 and 920, predominantly just conforming this as 134 and 137. AUC 910 is kind of interesting because there's no changes to the requirements or application material, but there are changes to the example report. All right, so that was a lot of information. So thank you for sitting through this one. Again, they're all just conforming amendments, no material. Well, I guess it's material because everything looks different, but this is to be expected because it's conforming to SAS 134, which is already issued. So thank you guys so much for joining me, and I hope to see you on a future Nano Learning. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.